And we're going to talk right now in this webinar, live webinar, about tensioning your Happy embroidery machine. So behind me in the background here is Happy's 12-needle Voyager machine, and it's got a good tension setup with an upper and lower knob up here for each needle position, and also that's going to control the drag or the tension on each individual color. But as we know with sewing machines, the tension is a combination of the tension on the particular color in combination with the tension on the spool of thread that's below the sewing plate, which is called the bobbin. So every loop of tension is really a balance between the loop of thread from your bobbin tension, which is there's a loop that's kind of pulling downwards. It's pulling the colored thread downwards, and the upper thread is pulling upwards. And they are typically in a ratio, depending on what kind of sewing machine you're using. As for example, with home sewing machines, single needle embroidery machines, they're operating at typically lower speeds, sewing at a certain range of fabrics, and often we see a tension ratio of about 3 or 4 to 1. What that means is that the upper tension is pulling up 3 or 4 times higher than the bottom tension, which is pulling down. So typically on a bobbin case that we're, which applies a certain amount of controlled drag using the tension flap on the side of the bobbin case here, this piece of metal, squeezes on that thread, and it pulls with a typical amount of force of about 25 grams. So when we test this, people have developed a test called the drop test. And the drop test is done by using a full bobbin, L-size bobbin inside the bobbin case, and when it's run through the tension flap, and you can test it by hanging it like a yo-yo. And since we want the tension to be about 25 grams, which happens to be the same weight, then same weight as the bobbin case itself, then if it's holding on with 25 grams, then the 25 gram bobbin and bobbin case should just hang in the air. But if we then dip our hand gently, just for a minute, just for a second, and stop, then for that moment it weighs a little bit more than 25 grams. So it unspools a little and stops, and then the friction will slow it back down until it weighs 25 grams again. So we're looking good tension with this bobbin because it's pulling just with exactly 25 grams, maybe give or take 1 or 2 grams. So that gives us a good idea that this is correct tension. So with a properly adjusted bobbin case, and of course you want to run the thread through the little wire loop at the top, which is normally a pigtail, and we'll hang that down about 4 to 6 inches, and we'll insert that fully into the inside the rotary hook basket here, inside the sewing arm, and push and let it snap. So now this is able to apply 25 grams of tension to all of the threads that are involved with sewing. So that's half of the tension right there, is making sure you have good, smooth, consistent tension with the bobbin. All right, now let's focus on the color tension. And what we'll do is we'll get our camera as close as we can to the nearest tension knob, so we can look at it and see what's going on. So we'll zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so what you're seeing here is that the tension for each color is applied by an upper knob and a lower knob. And then in the 12 needle and the 7 needle machines, all the compact Happies, in between there's a wheel that turns. So the thread has to feed correctly in a half turn and a half turn and a full turn around these knobs so that the wheel turns, and not only that, but the wheel also on the lower tensioner turns as well. And the combined efforts of the two knobs should produce a certain tension ratio for your Happy embroidery machine. With commercial machines, because you're running at higher speed, typical tensions are a little bit higher than a single needle machine or a home sewing machine. We're looking somewhere about 4 or 5 to 1. Now, what that translates to is that if you look at a satin stitch sew out here, before we continue with playing with the knobs, if you want to test your tension, really your end result that you're looking for is if you look at the reverse side of any satin stitch sew out, what you're looking for is what you're seeing here. The reverse side of any satin stitch should have a nice healthy stripe of white down the middle or whatever color your bobbin is, and that's your end result. It really doesn't matter what those numbers are, but if you want to start from some point and talk about 25 grams, then with a happy machine, then you're looking at about 4.5, 5 times that amount on the top. So for 25 grams on the bottom, multiply that by about 5, and you're somewhere around 125. Really, maybe in practice, it comes down to a little bit less than that, where you're starting to see that white stripe. So if you're looking for a measurable number, then you can actually use what's called a tension gauge, which is something you can buy. It works like a fish scale, and the thread will actually, you're actually pulling downwards on the thread, and as you pull downwards, a little red mark on the scale will actually show you the amount of pull in grams on that thread. So let's look at it in practice. So kind of zooming out. I'll move my arm out of the way here. Okay, so what we would do is pull the thread, and we're going to practice with the left side needle here, or in the Voyager's case, this machine's case, needle 12, I'm going to hook the thread, and I just want to pull it out of the thread holder from the back here, and then I just want to do a firm tug so that it's in the hook. And I don't even have to tie a knot, and I want to pull downwards. And as we pull downwards, the red mark, and let's see if I can do a little fancy camera work here, is the red mark will settle at a certain point. Now it may bob a little bit, but really the mark is showing, and I'm seeing it's bouncing right around maybe 100 grams, which is good. So that's how we're measuring tension. And what we do is then we adjust the knob, the two knobs up here, in case we don't see the tension we're looking for. So let's look at that a little bit more closely and see how we adjust that. Okay, both knobs act as a team. Now, some people might say this is the major tensioner, this is the minor tensioner, but really, the more you turn the knob, the more it's going to squeeze on its respective tensioner and put more drag on the thread. The secret is you want the two of these knobs to visually share the workload between them as much as you physically can. The end result really is just that 120 grams or that white bobbin stripe. So you want to look at the knob and see how far recessed in the top of the peg is that the knob is at the end. So in other words, the looser we make this, you can see that the further out the knob is and the less you can see the top of that peg. So by looking at that, you can visually guess about how far in and out these knobs are. So as you can also guess from that, we're not looking at a precise number of turns. One click doesn't equal 1 gram. All you're doing is turning just enough till you get the result. So right now we've determined that we want to tighten this down. So what we would do to make our adjustment is we want to pull downwards while turning the knob, and we want to turn the knob. And it looks like it's going to be kind of hard for me to get everything in the picture, but we want to turn the knob while we're pulling until we can feel with our hand when it's a little bit heavier. And I noticed it took me about 2 to 3 full turns to actually feel something. And you want to pick the knob that is further out between the two of these. If this one's further up, then start that one, or looser. If this one's looser, then start this one. So now this one, because I've tightened it down, is further in than this one, than the lower one. So now I know I need more tension, so I'll turn the lower one a couple more turns until I can feel it also tighter. So notice I'm doing about 2 to 3 turns each. And then basically you can remeasure your tension either by using your your tension gauge, and I can see I'm right at about 120 grams. So I got lucky here. I actually happen to have done this enough that I know, but you've got something now that you can measure either with a gauge, or you can retest your satin stitch design, and this is available for free on the happyemb.com website until that particular color is showing a nice healthy white stripe of bobbin thread. So that's a good overview of tension. And if, for those of you with single needle machines and with home sewing machines, then you want to get used to the idea that the upper tension on a happy machine might be a little bit tighter than what you're used to, but as that turns out, it lets you run at higher speeds and have a nice precise stitch. So that's our short lesson on tension, and I'd like to take some questions here to see if anybody has any on, again, adjusting the upper and lower tensioner.